Hello guys and girls, Board now back with you. On this video I will be talking about episode 6 of season 2 of the Umbrella Academy from Netflix, and it is called A Light Supper. And the light supper of the title is of course the invitation from the father to his children, his family, to all join him for an evening meal. He contacts them individually. So in the last episode we had like a sort of a flashy sort of like car pull up and like a man dressed almost like a butler who gave Diego and Luther like invitations. And at the time I sort of thought, oh okay, it's just those two for some reason. But no, it is actually the whole of the siblings, if you like, that in this episode they're all given invitations to join in him. So they obviously get together as a group, and that's kind of the big scene in a way, them going for this evening meal with their father, who of course doesn't necessarily believe that, hey, these are his children and that's to happen in the future. He's sort of very harsh about it at one point actually, where, well, he's already said this to Luther. He's kind of said, because I hate children and I would never have children, basically, even though he kind of does in the future. But I'll talk about those, like that scene, a bit more, but I guess I'll talk about some of the individual plots first, because this is another really enjoyable episode overall. I think this season is starting to get into its groove, and obviously it's probably largely down to the fact that we now have the group together as a whole, and they do work so well together, like the chemistry between the characters, the way they bounce off each other, because they all have kind of a little something different that they bring. And the casting of the leads in this show, I think, cannot be faulted. And it just feels like now they've got into like the groove of what the season is and the direction, and it's sort of moving in quite a positive like place, if you like. But there is some good stuff outside of that, the individual stuff. I think especially with Alison and maybe Klaus as well in this episode. But Alison, obviously the big cliffhanger with her in the last episode was that she agreed to tell Ray the whole truth. That was kind of the end of this. So in this episode, obviously she tries to tell him. She says, hey, I'm from the future, basically. I've got these special powers. And of course Ray, fair enough, doesn't believe her. So she goes to all these lengths to convince him. So they go out in public. And I mean, this is the strongest stuff in the episode, and I think it's partly why Alison has the best plot of all the characters this season, is because obviously her special powers and her like unique background, I think it does tie in quite nicely to the whole political situation and the whole theme of like racism and activism, you know, from the Black Lives Movement, if you like. Because the scene with her and Ray in this episode where they're out in the city and she's doing all these like things, it starts as quite a sort of a playful scene, and it's quite empowering because they go into like the clothes store, and it's a typically kind of racist like clothes store where they're told basically we don't serve black people, or we don't allow them to buy the clothes or try them on or something. I think the suggestion was that they could only buy them. They wouldn't, like, you either put the money forward and pay for it, or you can't. Yeah, whatever. But it's again a typically kind of racist sort of attitude. So what then happens is Alison uses her mind powers to turn that around, and she has this thing where she makes a statement and says something like, I believe, or I predict, or something, and then the person on the other end kind of does it. So it turns into like this fun sort of empowering type thing where her and Ray basically have the run of the store, so they get to wear the clothes, buy the fancy clothes, which obviously only white people can normally buy in that store, because they go back and they see like a nice dress for Alison. So I think this is a clever scene because it sort of starts off like that, and the whole purpose is for Alison to prove her powers to Ray, and it obviously becomes effective in this like fun like moment of empowerment. But then in the next bit it turns a bit more darker than that, because they go to like the cafe again, the cafe where they did the sit-in, and she turns things around on like the owner or the guy at the counter. So she obviously like hypnotizes him, mind controls him into like actually serving them. But then, as a sort of like quite a malicious payback for what he did at the sit-in, where he like spilt coffee on her intentionally, she does the same thing here, where he's obviously like pouring the coffee and she's controlling it so that he keeps pouring and pouring beyond like obviously the amount you would, so it's like spilling over and it's just burning him. And obviously she's got the control, and so it's turning quite aggressive. It's like she's like turning the tables on him because of what happened. So she is kind of arguably taking it a bit too far, although you can understand her anger. And Ray's getting kind of freaked and says, no, you're really hurting him, this is too far, sort of thing. And there's definitely something a bit malicious about what Alison is doing. So I think it's a really interesting scene because it does tie in well to the themes of the series of this season with Alison and the whole political stuff. And there is a certain amount of empowerment which is quite fun and, you know, obviously empowering, but at the same time she does go too far, and it brings into question the whole idea of having these sorts of powers, which I guess is a classic sort of sci-fi or fantasy type theme to explore. You know, how much is too much, and it's one thing to have these powers, it's always how you use them. Do you use them for good? And this sort of starts off as being good in a way, but then sort of turns quite nasty and sinister. And of course there's always the other argument, Nan, to kind of mind warp them into, you know, serving you and you know, getting your own way. Sure, it's all good, and I can understand why Alison would do it. But at the same time, I think the whole idea of progress and, you know, getting rid of racism and making things more equal is that, you know, white people should want to serve black people. It should be a choice where they see that, hey, they're equal to us, they're human beings, so they deserve everything we get. It sort of feels a bit tainted if your only way to do it is kind of like mind controlling them. But again, you can understand where Alison is coming from. But the fallout to this is that Ray does get quite distressed and upset, and it brings up other questions because he kind of asks, well, before I knew about all this stuff, did you use it on me in the past, like when we were kind of meeting and getting together? And she assures him that she doesn't, which I think is true. I don't think we've got any reason to think she did. It was like a natural relationship that grew. And that's actually the flashback at the start of this episode, because each one has had like a flashback. And it's Alison landing in the alley and being chased by a bunch of well, certainly jerks. They're certainly like sort of trying to hit on her and being quite aggressive, but again, it's probably like racially motivated as well. So they're chasing her and she runs into the salon, and that's when she gets the shelter, and the woman who owns the salon is she stands up to them basically and scares them off. And that's how obviously Alison gets involved with this whole group. She starts staying there. She meets Ray, and she gets involved in the whole political movement. So that's the flashback at the start. So, but interesting stuff with Alison and Ray. We'll have to see where they take it in the next few episodes. But that was really strong stuff. I also like the stuff with Klaus, as I said, where he's sort of convinced by Ben, his like ghost, to kind of disband the cult, saying this isn't healthy, you shouldn't be doing this. And that leads to some really funny stuff, because he tries to talk them out of it, like the cult, and kind of says, well, no, I'm just a fraud. And he points out that he uses like lyrics from a song. I forget which one it is actually. It's I've got it written down, but I knew that he'd previously used like the TLC lyrics Waterfalls. So just as a way to manipulate him, he's used, phrasing from a song as a way to get this message across, and passed it off as his own like phrase, if you like, rather than from a song. So he kind of says that. So there's this big like sort of comedic scene where he's kind of saying I'm a fraud and all this sort of stuff. And the problem is it's that classic thing, because they're so enamoured with him, because they're so buying into like is like Kool-Aid, if you like, then they start saying, oh, I'm a fraud as well, and it's almost like it makes the situation worse. They're still like not going away, not freeing themselves of him, they're still attached to him in a different sort of way. And on a more personal note, Dave comes to visit Klaus because he obviously feels badly about the way he acted in the diner. So he's very apologetic. That wasn't me. I was kind of goaded into it. But they have a serious talk about this whole thing to do with the war, and Klaus's concerns. And that's when Klaus basically said, hey, I'm from the future, you knew me in the war, so I've seen what actually happened. And obviously, Dave, this is a common theme with people in this, in the past scenes, then they obviously don't believe them. They don't believe that they're from the future and that they have these powers and stuff. But Dave basically says, because he tries to justify it by being quite patriotic, because he kind of says, even if I believed you, which I don't, I do believe it's my duty to my country to do this. So he's almost kind of justifying the fact that he could die to serve his country, which I know is a legitimate sort of argument, but obviously he's kind of saying that. He's almost saying, well, even if I believed you and knew I was going off to die, it would be my honour, sort of thing. So it kind of doesn't go well. Dave kind of storms out and says, no, I'm going to war anyway. And there's a bit of a twist where he says, it's too late, I've already been enlisted. My uncle enlisted me after what happened in the diner. So that really deflates Klaus, because that's an interesting example where Klaus says, by trying to get involved, he's actually like adjusted history for the worst sort of thing. Because, by getting involved and that intervention in the diner, it's actually speeded up the process of Dave being enlisted, whereas the other way, there was still more time, more of a chance. So, really bad scene for Klaus, or the end of the scene. So, really kind of deflated. I think that's the meaty stuff as far as, the subplots sort of that's going on. There's this thing with the handler and Five, where Five, she makes him an offer to take out this group of people. This, I can't remember what it calls it, something. The council, some sort of council or something, which we've not really heard about before. But she has some sort of an axe to grind because of the way she was like demoted at the start of this season. And so she says to Five, well, if you take out these people, then the apocalypse is off. I can avert it. I can stop it. I can get you and your family home. So that's this interesting sort of bargaining type thing. This offer of a deal, which Five doesn't originally go for. He's not so keen on it. He's more willing to go down the route of let's go and see our dad in the past and let's try and adjust things this way, because I mean what they've got is all very shaky, but there's certainly, I mean Diego certainly believes that the dad is involved in killing Kennedy somehow, the plot, and that is their mission, to try and stop Kennedy from being killed, and that is the way to avert the apocalypse. But there are others who obviously question that. There's no solid evidence for that. Then that would make the difference. But so at first, Five doesn't accept the offer. And there's some pretty good stuff with the handler in the episode as well, because we see her at one point going to like the sauna, and you've got the two remaining like Swedes in there, and she brings up, well, I know what happened to your brother, and I know the guy who did it, and I can give you his details, where to find him and where to obviously go after him. And again, it's her own self-serving thing. She's obviously lying because she's the one who killed him, but she's playing on that whole thing. It's a funny little scene, because they're in a sauna, you got all this smoke, and this woman walks in and starts talking and getting confrontational, and then one of them goes over and obviously intends to harm her, but she actually like grabs him by the balls, like underneath the steam. It's a really funny visual, but it really shows what a tough, agent she is, and how she really, almost through weight of her personality, can just stand up to like sort of like thugs like this. So she uses that and says, here's the details, you can go after Diego. So obviously making them think Diego's the one who killed the brother. So then they go after Diego, but he's not around at the time. She gives them the address, and Diego is with the rest of the family at the dinner with the father. And it leads to actually quite a graphic sort of torture scene, which it cuts back and forth on, but we do see a decent amount of blood where they're torturing the UFO guy, who's obviously, it's his place, so he's the only one there. And it's quite a good character beat for him, because they're trying to find out where Diego is or when he will be back or something. And he's not giving them any information. He actually does stand up for Diego, and it leads to them torturing him, and ultimately that he's dead. When Five and Diego and the others come back, they find him dead. So yeah, pretty brutal scene. Quite a good character scene for him though, because of the way he doesn't give up Diego any information. So that's pretty cool. But yeah, by the end of the episode, Five actually takes the deal with the handler, and she gives him like the address of where these people are supposed to be. And that's because they go for the dinner with the dad, and they don't really go anywhere. There's a scene where he sort of bonds with Five on his own, and there's like a begrudging respect, and they reflect on the past, and the fact that they didn't have a good relationship, even though the dad at this point seems to be in denial about he's really their father and the whole superpowers things. But there's a scene there, but the scene itself and the dinner with the family, not a lot happens. It's just one of these quirky little scenes where they're all individually showing off their powers and trying to convince him that, hey, we're telling the truth. And it's a lot of stuff, fun back and forth. Klaus gets actually like possessed by Ben, which is quite funny, and it's quite a clever moment, because the whole thing is that Ben is like the other Umbrella Academy, who hasn't been acknowledged in the room because he's obviously dead, but it's his way of getting acknowledgement to actually possess Klaus. There's a fun moment with Wanda where she like uses her powers to like basically send fruit flying everywhere from like the basket in the middle of the table, and that goes over people. Alison does her whole thing again, which is where she like mind warps Diego into punching himself because they're having a little back and forth. Luther like rips open his shirt, shows off his chest and stuff. So it's a fun scene, and it's not really a lot happening, but again, it's just one of these fun like Umbrella Academy quirky sort of scenes. But ultimately it's a dead end because the father doesn't believe them or doesn't want anything to do with them. He's almost like intrigued by what they're saying, and he's quite amused by them showing off their powers, but ultimately I think it is more the spite on his part. I think there must be some side of him that believes them, but he just doesn't want anything to do with it. So it proves a dead end because he also denies their theory that he is planning to kill Kennedy, that he is part of the plot. You know, even though they show him the picture, he's still not having any of it. So it's kind of a dead end. There's not much more they can do with that. So that I think that's why 5 then makes the deal with the handler, because he maybe figures that's the best way to move forward to try and stop the apocalypse. So that's all really good stuff. I think that's setting us up for some good sort of interesting moments in the last few episodes. There's more stuff with Wanda, like Sissy like comes to her after the dramatic scene last episode, and she actually apologizes and say, you know what, I actually do want to be with you. I think we should run away. And Wanda kind of goes with this quite easily because she's always, I think partly because of her amnesia, she's always been a bit on the outside of what's happening with the others, and sort of feels, hey, I am quite enjoying my new life. I don't really remember much about the old life, so I'm actually quite happy to pursue this relationship and this new life with Sissy. So they actually do plan to run away together. But the thing then is we see Carl watching them in the car, so okay, there's going to be more drama there next episode. So I'm least into that stuff really, but that's just a little sort of beat. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it. I think I've covered most of the stuff. So good episode again, really strong episode. Might be the best of the season so far actually. So that's my thoughts on Umbrella Academy, the 6th episode of season 2. Let me know your thoughts. Are you enjoying this season? Yeah, let me know your overall thoughts in the comments below. More stuff coming up, more new TV shows from Netflix, also the new HBO show Lovecraft Country, which starts on Monday, or it does in the UK anyway, so that's when I'll be watching it. But yeah, I'll see you guys again soon. Thanks for listening. See you later.